let's talk about some stashes. You know what? Next season's going to be here before you know it. So maybe you're a good team, maybe you're a bad team, maybe you're somewhere right in the middle. How could we stash somebody for next year? And then, we'll get into why we're stashing that person. So, Nate, let's kick it off with you. Who do you got?
All right. I got a guy I talk about all the time on this podcast, but haven't in a little bit because he hasn't been on the field, which makes him a great stash this year. And I'm talking about Christian Kirk, wide receiver for the Jaguars. Now, I'll preface and say, hey, Christian Kirk ain't no Darnell Mooney, but Christian Kirk could be Darnell Mooney next year. So he's going to be back with the Jags next year, fully healthy in 2025. And I was, looking at, he only played in 8 games, but in those 8 games, he did have 27 receptions for 379 yards, only 1 touchdown. The Jaguars offense definitely struggled to start the season. Sure. They've struggled throughout most of the season, to be honest. And he was wide receiver 60 in points per game, which tied with Brandon Ayuk, to be fair. But, we didn't get a lot of Christian Kirk showings this year. But we did, against Buffalo in week 3, see him get 10 targets, 8 receptions, 79 yards. In week 4 against Houston, he had 12 targets, 7 receptions for 61 yards and a touchdown. We saw the Christian Kirk that we saw last year, when he finished as a top 24 wide receiver. But we didn't get the full 8 games of that because the Jaguars offense just has struggled. And, we're looking at a new coaching regime next year. We're looking at, some turnover there. So I'm hoping that they can get somebody in there that is going to really build around T-Law. They have the pieces around him with Christian Kirk, Brian Thomas, Evan Ingram. I got 2 running backs in the backfield who are pretty good, I think. So there's a lot this offense can do. They just need the right coach to get them there. And I think Christian Kirk can still be a large aspect of that offense. He is only 28 years old at the moment. So he's not, on the other side of 30 yet. I think we still have a good 3 or 4 years of Christian Kirk, especially with the way he plays. He's not someone that's out there, out physicality. I don't know what the right term for that would be. Out physicaling somebody else. That's what I'm going to go with. Physically.
Let's stick with that one. Yeah,
physically. So let's look at some values, because part of the reason I want to stash somebody is they're good value right now. And with him being on IR for a couple weeks now, I think he's become a good value. First trade I found, Adam Thielen, straight up for Christian Kirk.
Yeah, I'm okay with that. Thielen's playing again, but he's on the back half of his career.
32 now.
Yeah, Kirk's got more time left in the league. I'm okay with that one.
Yep. Next one I got up here, and if you're contender, I'm definitely keeping the running back here. But if you're looking towards next year, this is a good move. Isaac Guerrero. He's going to be a huge, waiver wire pickup this week. But if you're not looking to play this year, great move to move him for Christian Kirk next year.
Yeah, and especially where Isaac Guerrero was likely drafted in your rookie draft or not drafted in some cases. I'm okay with this move as well. The Niners, man, they got some problems with running back. CMC, Jordan Mason going on IR. Brutal.
Yeah, it's tough. Just when I thought Jordan Mason was back, he wasn't.
Yeah.
And then last one here is Christian Kirk for a 27 second.
Yeah.
But, I think if you move a second, which is definitely the top end of Christian Kirk's value for me at the moment, because I think next year when he's healthy, you can move him for a second. So I don't want to pay anything more than a second. I'm paying that just to get that value back. It doesn't feel like a steal or anything, but I think that's still fair value at the ceiling.
I would agree with that as well. Nate, let's go on to my first stash. And I know this is going to shock you, but I'm going to the tight end position. And I'm going to be talking about Washington Commanders tight end Ben Sinnott. Look, we all like Ben Sinnott in the pre-draft process. Pretty versatile. Played fullback at times. Nice tight end there too. Unfortunately, he does have Zach Ertz in front of him. But Zach Ertz, he's 34, and he's scheduled to be a free agent after this season. And look, Ertz has birthed some really good tight ends that have sat behind him. Kind of an odd way for me to say that. But guys like Dallas Goedert, Trey McBride, guys like that, these guys have all popped. And look at what Zach Ertz has done on the season. I'm not saying that Ben Sinnott's going to come in and be Zach Ertz. I'm not saying that. But at 34, Ertz is going for 52 receptions, 501 yards, and 4 touchdowns. So,
impressive.
It's still very impressive. This is his best season since 2021. Yeah, when he had over 700 yards and 5 touchdowns split between the Eagles and the Cardinals. So Zach Ertz still getting it done at 34. Ben Sinnott, this was a guy, we loved him. A lot of the people in the fantasy community loved him pre-draft. So I think now is the time. kind of forgotten. A lot of people are making playoff pushes. This is a guy you can snag relatively cheaply. We'll get to the value in a second. On the season, only 3 catches, 18 yards, and a touchdown. So not much to go off of there. But again, I'm stashing for upside and opportunity next year, especially if my team is not very good. But hey, what does it cost to get Ben Sinnott on your roster? I have really good news. Not a whole lot. And these are all trades. My trades courtesy of Fantasy Calc. Yours, Nate, I believe were from Dynasty Daddy.
Yes, sir.
Keyshawn Boutte.
Yeah, I'm good with that trade.
He's getting some run, but I do expect the Patriots to add to their wide receiver room in the offseason, either free agency or through the draft. So Boutte could get kind of shoved back aside. 25 4th-round pick.
Yep, good with that.
Here's what I'm not so sure about. Hunter Henry straight up.
Yeah, I mean, I'd probably take Hunter Henry with how he's performing this year. He's been one of Drake Mays' favorite targets so far, if not his favorite target, just overall. Hunter Henry's been impressive.
Yeah, he has. And, that was a guy, remember, we loved him when he was with the Chargers, just kind of bounced around a little bit. He seems to have found a really good spot for him in New England. If that's the case, I would stick with Hunter Henry as well, unless I was getting something back on top of it. Sinnott and maybe a couple thirds.
Yeah, I think Sinnott in the third is kind of where I'd start. Maybe need a bit more than that if I'm a contending team, but yeah,
possibly.
Next stash here, and this is a little bit different. This guy's actually performing pretty well this year, but he's young, so let's talk about it. Breece Hall, running back for the Jets. All right, he's had kind of an up and down season. I feel like a lot of people have been disappointed with his season so far, but he's still RB11 on the season, RB13 in points per game. He's got 692 rushing yards and 4 rushing touchdowns, 46 receptions, 401 yards, and 2 touchdowns through the air. We know that Breece Hall is going to be a weapon through the air. He was last year, and that really buoyed his fantasy production. He's done it so this year as well, which has also been a huge factor for his fantasy production, because you see 4 touchdowns on the ground. That's not a lot through 13 weeks. We definitely expected more coming into the season from Breece Hall finding the end zone, but that Jets offense just hasn't really been smooth at all this year. So let's talk about Breece Hall, because he's got Braylon Allen behind him, who we love pre-draft and has performed well when he did get in this season. Yes. Breece Hall also is on 1 year left of his deal, his rookie deal. And what are the Jets going to look like next year? Is Aaron Rodgers going to be there? I'm not sure. Maybe that's a good thing for Breece Hall. He had a better season last year when Aaron Rodgers was out. The team relied on him a bit more. They were able to feed him and, kind of build their offense around him. A lot of times we're looking for guys in good offenses, and it's heavily correlated that players in good offenses score a lot of fantasy points naturally. But sometimes especially with the running back position, if you're like the only guy out there, you're going to get a lot of the run and you're going to make some fantasy points out of that. And we saw that last year. Now, like I said, Braylon Allen's behind him now, but we're talking about Breece Hall, 23 years old, already been someone that, has been one of the best running backs in the league. I don't think that's going away anytime soon, whether or not it's on the Jets in 2 years or a different team in 2 years. We still have him next year. I think Breece Hall is still a top dynasty back for me. And I was surprised to see that his value is not as high in the trade market as I really figured it would be for someone who has been so productive early in his career and is still only 23 years old for the running back position. Mike, these trades, not super cheap, but I think for Breece Hall, they might be cheap, okay? I did see a range of them. Some were obviously a bit more expensive than this. I did see some that were a little bit cheaper than this. But I think these were about medium value for where I was looking on Dynasty Daddy. And starting it off, Jordan Addison, a 2nd and a 4th round pick for Breece Hall.
Okay with that?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I'd move Jordan Addison in a 1st and a 4th. Kyle Pitts in a 1st round pick.
That one's tough. Kyle Pitts has so much upside, just hasn't truly been unlocked yet. Would you say that's fair? I
think it's pretty fair.
Yeah, I don't know. I would feel better if it was Kyle Pitts in a 2nd, but I don't think that gets it done.
No, I don't think so either.
Yeah.
I think I saw a stat the other day that Kyle Pitts' start to his career is essentially the same as Noah Fant, which is really disappointing.
Not looking great.
It's like within 10 fantasy points, 15 fantasy points of Noah Fant's career.
That's crazy.
Through that point. Yeah, that's unfortunate. And then the last trade I got here, my guy, Ladd McConkey in a 1st round pick for Breece Hall in a 2nd.
I don't hate that one.
I like both sides of this trade, to be honest.
Yeah, I think that's a win-win right there. I'm going to talk about another running back here. We're going to keep it going with the running back train. Los Angeles Chargers running back Kimani Vidal. Going to be interesting to see what they will do. J.K. Dobbins was put on IR this past week. He's going to be a free agent after the season. Now, Gus Edwards is under contract through 2025. He's also going to be 30. And if you look at the cap hit, he's pretty cuttable too if they decided to part ways. Now, I'm not saying that Kimani Vidal is just going to all of a sudden be the lead back next year for Los Angeles. Is it possible? Yes. Is it likely? Probably not, but you never know, right? These things could happen. We've seen stranger things happen. Still, I do think that even if they stick with Gus, Vidal should be a good RB2. They cut Gus, bring somebody else in. I think he has a really clear shot to be the running back too for the Chargers, which could end up being pretty good for you as, a nice flex play occasionally, a good running back, hopefully 4 on your team, not a running back 3. But let's look at what he's done against Atlanta. 4 carries for 20 yards, no touchdowns. And on the season, only 22 carries, 64 yards, no touchdowns there. But check out what he did in college, Nate. He was a beast at Troy. 781 carries, 4,010 yards, 33 touchdowns on the ground, 92 receptions, 700 yards and 1 touchdown through the air. And his senior year was his best year. 297 carries, 1,661 yards, and 14 touchdowns, 18 receptions, 201 yards, and 1 touchdown. So this guy, he can get it done. He just needs his opportunity. And I think it's going to slowly make its way there where he's making more and more of a case to be part of the Chargers offense next season. But what does it cost to get him, Nate? That is a great question. A 27th third-round pick.
Yeah, I'm okay with that. If it was a 25th third, I would maybe be a little hesitant just because I'm going to say this about Vidal and any other day 3 running back from this year's draft class. Next year's draft class looks really good.
It looks really, really good.
Looks really good. And I know some people are tired of Dynasty folks saying, oh, next year's draft class is pretty good. All right, well, this year's wide receiver class was really good for the top 5, and the rest of it has been crap. This year's running back, we told you guys, we were excited about it, but then a lot of the guys went back. So we weren't as excited about this running back class, and we were very upfront about that. We're really excited about this coming year's class. And we've been talking about that for over a year once we saw those guys go back. Speaking of Devin Neal, just the other day declared for the NFL draft. And that was someone that we had as a top 5 running back in this past year's NFL draft. And he probably won't even be a top 5 running back in this coming draft. So something I'm trying to take into account with these day 3 running backs, because there's a couple of them I do like, and I like the opportunities that are possibly in line for them in 2025. But with the depth of this upcoming running back class, I'm wondering how many of them just get pushed out because of the talent rising up from college.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see. Next one, Jalen Coker and a 25 third.
Yeah.
Back to the 25 third.
Back to the 25 third. I'm not a huge Jalen Coker fan. He's not been someone I've been a huge fan of. I know some people on Twitter are big fans of cokeheads, is what they call them. But I'm okay with making this trade, especially with Dobbins out for the year, because Vidal might get some run this year, which might get him some momentum into next year.
Yeah. Last one, and this trade was made after Jordan Mason was put on IR, by the way. Jordan Mason for Kimani Vidal and a 25 third.
Yeah, I would do that. I noticed in my own searching on Dynasty Daddy that there were a good amount of trades made for Jordan Mason after he was put on IR, where he was still valued at a 3rd-round pick or so. So interesting. Yeah.
I did see somebody put in our Discord. If you want to get in there, patreon.com/Dynasty Rankings, and you can try it out for a week for free. They said, hey, is this career ending for CMC? I don't know about that. The injuries are definitely piling up, not looking great. Nate, who's your next stash?
All right. I haven't even thought about this guy in a long time, and you probably haven't either. A lot of the listeners probably haven't thought about him in a while. He's kind of been MIA. He hasn't played a single down this entire season, Mike, and that is Marquise Brown, former Ravens 1st-round pick. I know him well. He was very productive when he was with the Ravens. He was productive with the Cardinals. Found himself in Kansas City this year. Unfortunately, had an injury before the season. Has not played at all this year. But, I saw a training video on Twitter, man. He's coming back strong, right? Well, he should be back sometime around the end of the season, ready for playoffs probably to get a couple snaps in there. So we will see him at some point this season. We know the Chiefs are going to make the playoffs. I expect Marquise Brown to be around once we get to playoff time. Going ahead and stashing him now is always a good idea because you're getting ahead of the curve. We know, Mike, we've been through a couple years of playoff football and how that affects dynasty values. You see a guy go off in a playoff game, his dynasty value is going to skyrocket.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, there was You remember the year that Gabe Davis had a couple touchdowns in the
Mhm.
playoffs? I mean, the rest of the offseason, that guy, his value was heavily inflated. So these playoff implications are throughout Dynasty fantasy football all the time. And Marquise Brown's going to have an opportunity there. Now, that's one reason. Another reason is he's a good player. He just unfortunately hasn't played this entire year, and everyone's forgot about him. And he's a free agent after this year, so he can go wherever he wants, that he's going to have opportunity. And I like that for him because he's only 27 years old. He's not some guy who's, had an injury and now while he's on the end of his career. No, he's 27. He's in his prime. So I really like the idea of going after Marquise Brown, especially after I saw how cheap he's going for right now, because he's just sitting on someone's IR. They haven't played him all year. They haven't seen him in over a year. So he's going for Jordan Mason post IR. He's going for a 4th-round pick. And that seemed low to me. So I kept scrolling to see, hey, is there anyone else who's traded him for a 4th-round pick? There were multiple trades where it was just a 4th-round pick straight up for Marquise Brown, which honestly is a complete steal if you can make that happen. I would definitely pay a 3rd-round pick if I'm thinking like a late 3rd, mid-3rd, maybe even early 3rd if I have a couple 3rds to play with, because as soon as Brown gets back on the field, he's going to have at least a 2nd-round value. And I'm all about value here. If I can get him for a 3rd-round pick, flip him for a 2nd later, who even needs to worry about him producing on my team, I could also keep him and he could produce depending on where he goes.
True.
And then, Mike, there's another player I forgot about this trade. Vele, I didn't forget about him. Vele for the Broncos, plus Brevin Jordan, a name I haven't heard in a long time, but a name I actually loved for a while there. Those two guys for Marquise Brown. Now, I know Vele is playing right now, but I would move the 25, 26-year-old rookie for Marquise Brown, who's much more accomplished and only a year and a half older.
Yeah, and Brevin Jordan currently on injured reserve too. I mean, just what a drop off.
It warmed my heart that somebody traded for him.
Yeah. Talk about the ultimate. Yeah, I do. I like all these trades. And as going back to the 4th-round pick, sure, I'll gladly do that. And if I think it's going to be a later third, I would be fine with that as well. Nate, I have one last stash, and then I want to circle back to something. You'll circle back.
All right.
I'm going to be stashing Cincinnati Bengals wide receiver Jermaine Burton. T. Higgins set to leave. And if he does go, who's to say that they draft or replace somebody in free agency, right? Cincinnati really needs help defensively, for sure. Because, look, they still have Andre Yoshivas, if I'm saying that right, and Jermaine Burton. And Jermaine Burton was a very good collegiate athlete. Now, this year, he's only had 4 receptions for 107 yards and no touchdowns, but he's averaging 26.8 yards per reception. Yes, his long was 40-some yards. I think it was 47. But in college, Nate, 132 catches, 2,376 yards, and 22 touchdowns. He led the SEC in yards per reception in 2023 with 20.5. Pretty impressive. The SEC, a lot of good wide receivers come out of the SEC. That's why I took note of that. What does it cost to get Jermaine Burton? Keenan Allen playing really well right now. But
I'd have Keenan Allen. I'm not a big Burton fan, and I will say that as someone who was a fan of him in college, but when he just couldn't figure it out, like Jermaine Burton, I feel like he's doing the same thing he did at Alabama. He gets there, you're like, this guy's, well, originally he's at Georgia, okay? So he's a highly recruited guy. He goes to Georgia. You're like, this guy's got all the potential in the world. Can't put it together. All right, he transfers to Alabama. This guy's got all the potential in the world. Look at him. Look at him out there. He looks great. Can't put it together consistently, though. Goes to the Bengals. Same thing. Oh, look at him. He's got some flashes. This guy can put it together. I'm not a believer, unfortunately, as much as I did like Jermaine Burton at one point.
All right, what about if you traded Khalil Shakir and Jermaine Burton for a 25-second? You're not a competing team. Getting a nice stash and a 2nd on top of it.
I like Khalil Shakir.
I do like Khalil Shakir more.
I think I'm going to take the Shakir side here.
Okay. And this was a super flex league. Someone traded Aiden O'Connell straight up for him.
If I'm not a contending team, I'm okay with trading AOC for Jermaine Burton because I don't think O'Connell's going to be the quarterback next year.
No.
So not with the draft pick they're about to have.
I like O'Connell. He's got a good career, a long career as a backup in the NFL.
Yeah, I think O'Connell's good, a good backup, but and I think he can definitely be a good spot starter, but I don't think he's going to be the guy that's going to be anywhere long term. And Mike, you said something I want to circle back before you circle back. You mentioned something about, it's not necessarily true that the Bengals just going to replace T. Higgins with somebody they draft. And we just talked about how good this running back class is going to be. At this point, I am not a big fan of this wide receiver class. And that might change as I get into the film and get through more guys. But at this point, there are a couple guys at the top, like McMillan, Burton, Travis Hunter, if he decides to play wide receiver, Emeka Egbuka. But really, after like those 4 guys, it gets murky. And I don't know how many first-round wide receivers we have. And that's to say, I mean, I like Emeka Egbuka, but if he's limited to the slot, is he even going to be a first-round pick? Especially, I don't know if we can just think about this draft as the same as the couple drafts that we've seen recently, where you just have a bunch of wide receivers come in, they hit the ground running. Every team's just got a rookie wide receiver. I don't know if we're going to see that this year. This might be more of an old school draft where we have these running backs that are replacing the running back talent in the league. And the guys that were drafted this year and last year, they have that second, third year breakout because there's opportunities for them with this next draft class.
But you did ask me, I forgot, I kind of went past it when we were talking about Ben Sinnott. You put a question here, Sinnott or Theo Johnson? And I have to say to you, why would you do that to me?
Well, you put on a rookie tight end, and with Theo Johnson going on IR, he becomes a bit of a stash. And I just wanted to kind of compare the two because now, obviously, I think we're all going to say Theo because his production so far this year.
Yes.
But I should have probably put some trades up here for Theo Johnson because I wonder how expensive Theo Johnson is at the moment in comparison to Ben Sinnott.
So my reasoning for putting Ben Sinnott on here is just, for me with this stash, it's about value. And I think right now, Ben Sinnott's going to be the better value. We're going to be looking at a player who is going to be on a better team next year. I don't know if the Giants are going to keep Brian Dable, maybe give him a clean slate with a new quarterback. He walked in there with Daniel Jones, but hey, the Giants also extended Daniel Jones while Brian Dable was there. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens there. But I do think, Ben Sinnott, sky's the limit for him with Jaden Daniels. They have a really good offense that they're putting together. So I like what Washington's doing, honestly.
All right. Let me give you this then. Some trades for Theo Johnson, Hunter Henry.
Now I think that's a better straight up trade than the Ben Sinnott trade.
Yeah. Also Jordan Mason for Theo Johnson.
Man, Jordan Mason getting some movement.
Yeah, he is. Marvin Mims straight up for Theo Johnson.
Marvin Mims just had a really good game.
He did.
Last night, by the way.
This is not straight up, but I like this trade a lot. A 25 first for Dalton Kincaid and Theo Johnson together.
I like that trade.
Love that trade. Go buy Dalton Kincaid while everyone is hating on him. And then Isaac Rendo for Theo Johnson. If you're a stashing team, then
yeah, these 49ers running backs there.
They get moved around, man. It's just whoever the hot hand is.
I would prefer Theo Johnson over Ben Sinnott, but like I said, the value right now I just think is a lot better for Sinnott. Although those trades for Theo were not bad overall.